Last summer, I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I was 14 at the time and living with my dad in downtown Philadelphia. When my parents divorced, my mom took most of my dad's money and he was forced to buy a small one-bedroom apartment. That left me to sleep in the living room on an air mattress. The reason I woke up was because I heard a cracking noise come from the window. We had to keep them open on account that we didn't have any central air. The crackling woke me up, and I looked over at the window. There, leaning into the living room through the window, was someone I did not recognize. I seriously thought I was dreaming or hallucinating. As I wiped away my sleepy eyes, I realized quickly that this was no dream. It was an old man. He had wrinkly skin, a huge mole on the left side of his face, and he smelled horrible. He saw me looking at him in horror and gave me this big, toothy grin. As I turned away to run into my dad's bedroom, I saw that he was now fully in our apartment. I burst into my dad's room, pleading with him that someone was in the house. He believed me and told me to wait in the room. He walked out and down the hall into the living room. It must have been only 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity waiting for anything to happen. My dad finally came back into the room, a look of relief on his face, and said, "No one was there." I thought that was impossible. I wasn't dreaming and I wasn't making it up. But together, we searched the whole apartment, finding no one. From that point on, I slept on my air mattress in my dad's room. He eventually made enough money where we could have AC and were able to lock the windows at night. This was by far the most terrifying experience I've had in my life. I know this will sound messed up, but I'm just gonna say it. Old people scare the shit out of me. I know I'll get hate for this, but whatever. Just hear my story first, then you can judge me. About 2 years ago, I got a Facebook message from someone named Greg Connors. I opened the message and it said, "Why are you alone?" Mind you, I was in my room when I opened this, and it was about 11:30 at night. Confused, I clicked on Greg's profile to see who this was. I went to his pictures, and it was this old man. He had the typical grandparent-style photos. One of him sitting on a recliner holding a dog. One of them at some restaurant and smiling in a booth. I thought it was some spam account and decided to ignore it. That's when I got a text. Not on Facebook, an actual text sent to my direct number. It was a picture of my house, directly at my bedroom, with my light on. I quickly realized that the photo was taken in real time. Before I could react, I received another text. It said, "Sweetie, I've been lonely for a long time." Then my phone started ringing. It was that same number. Panicked, I ran to my older brother's room. He was still awake and playing his PlayStation. I showed him all the texts and calls. When I showed him the picture of Greg Connors, he was stunned. He said that he used to be his old English teacher back in the 4th grade. As my brother was scrolling through the Facebook photos, my phone rang again. At the same time, we could hear a noise coming from downstairs. We both crept down the stairs to investigate. To our horror, the front door was wide open, the lock clearly broken. We immediately woke up our parents and called the police. They took forever to get there, but eventually did. Upon investigating the house, they did find footprints. But the weirdest and strangest part of all, we found out that Greg Connors died 5 years prior. So, if he was dead, then who had access to his Facebook? And who was it that broke into our house? To this day, we have no idea. Now every old person I see, I'm freaked out. Yes, I know that one day I will be old too, God willing, but I try to keep my distance as best as possible. Holy shit, do I have a story for you. I used to live in a small town out in Utah. It was me, my parents, and my younger sister. Just the 4 of us. When I say we lived in a small town, I mean it. I'm pretty sure the population was under 2,000. Anyway, We used to have this really old neighbor, Ellen. Ellen had been widowed for over 20 years, and she lived alone with her cats. Despite her being a typical old cat lady, she was very pleasant. I remember when I was really young, she even babysitted me while my parents worked. Well, as she got older, her mind started to decay. It's actually really sad, but sometimes we would find her wandering around the street at night or walking around in our garden. And it was terrible, but she had no other family who could help assist her or put her in her home. Well, there was one night in particular when we had my youngest sister sleeping downstairs. She was only 1.5 at the time. It was late. I can't remember the exact time, but all of a sudden, my sister started to bawl her eyes out. Almost as if in sync, I'm rushing down the stairs alongside with my mom and dad. When we entered the living room, which is where she slept in her crib, we froze. My little sister was being held by Ellen. She was rocking her back and forth and whispering gibberish to her. That's when we noticed the knife. She had it in her left hand while she held my sister. My dad yelled, and Ellen dropped my sister. She fell hard to the floor and started crying even harder. My dad rushed over, and that's when I noticed Ellen was peeing herself. It was streaming down her legs. Then, she collapsed to the floor. To make a long story short, an ambulance came out and took her away. We later found out Ellen died in the hospital due to a brain aneurysm. It must have caused her to snap, and she wasn't thinking clearly. While I do feel bad for Ellen, it was hands down the scariest moment in my life. My little sister ended up needing stitches in her head from the drop, but she's doing fine. All in all, if you notice your elderly neighbors starting to act weird or funny, don't ignore it. That's my story.